The steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only thing anchoring me to reality. It sounded like a countdown, a slow and agonizing metronome ticking away the final moments of my life. My chest felt like it was wrapped in heavy, rusty barbed wire, every shallow breath sending sharp spikes of pure agony through my ribs and down my spine. Sepsis does not knock politely. It does not introduce itself with a gentle cough or a mild fever. It kicks the front door down, sets your blood on fire, and pulls up a chair to watch you burn from the inside out. I was 31 years old, lying in an intensive care unit in a sterile Atlanta hospital, shivering so violently that my teeth clicked together despite the massive mountain of heated blankets the nurses had piled on top of my frail body. I was dying. The doctors had whispered the words "critical condition" just outside my door, thinking I was too out of it to hear them. And all I wanted, the only thing my fever-addled, desperate brain could focus on in that moment of ultimate terror, was hearing my father's voice telling me to hold on. I wanted my mother to stroke my hair. I wanted my family. I reached for my phone resting on the bedside tray. My hand was heavily bruised, painted in ugly shades of purple and yellow from the constant barrage of 4 needles and blood draws. It took me 3 separate tries just to swipe the screen and unlock it, my fingers trembling uncontrollably. I expected to see a barrage of texts. I expected missed calls, frantic voicemails saying they were rushing to the hospital, asking which terminal they were landing at, asking if I was awake. Instead, the screen illuminated my dark, quiet room with just one single notification. A text message from my dad, Orson. I blinked hard, trying to clear the blur of the high fever from my eyes. I focused on the glowing letters. The message read, "A funeral is cheaper than your ICU bill. Enjoy the drama, Vesper." Below that cruel, jagged line of text was a photo. It was a bright, glossy, perfectly framed picture of my father, my mother Odelia, and my younger sister Tamsin. They were standing closely together, holding up crystal glasses of expensive champagne, grinning widely under the blinding, opulent lights of a Las Vegas casino. The location tag proudly displayed the Bellagio Hotel and Casino. They looked radiant. They looked happy. They looked entirely unbothered by the fact that their oldest daughter was currently suffocating on her own infected fluids 2,000 miles away. That sentence burned itself into my retinas. A funeral is cheaper than your ICU bill. It was not a joke. It was not a clumsy slip of the tongue from a man who did not know how to handle bad news. It was a calculated, vicious strike aimed right at my exposed throat. While my major organs were shutting down and my immune system was fighting a losing, bloody battle against a massive infection, my own family was 3 time zones away, gambling, drinking, and soaking up the neon lights on a luxury vacation funded entirely by my bank account. The sheer cruelty of it knocked the remaining breath out of my lungs faster than the pneumonia ever could. For years, for as long as I had been an adult, I had been their safety net. I was their personal ATM, the reliable, boring older daughter who fixed every mistake, smoothed over every financial disaster, and paid every single bill they shoved in my direction. And now, when I needed them just to show up, just to sit in a plastic chair and hold my hand so I wouldn't have to face death entirely alone, they scoffed at my pain. They thought my dying was an inconvenience, a dramatic stunt meant to ruin their luxury getaway. I stared at the glowing screen until the display timed out and went black. The paralyzing fear that had been gripping my chest for the past 2 days evaporated into the cold, sterile hospital air. In its place, something dark, cold, and incredibly sharp began to take shape. I did not cry. My tear ducts felt dry, scorched by the fever, but my mind had never been clearer in my entire 31 years of existence. A part of me, the pathetic, desperate, people-pleasing daughter who just wanted to earn a scrap of affection from her parents, died right there in that uncomfortable hospital bed. But the woman who woke up from that death was not going to be a victim anymore. I dropped the phone onto the tangled white sheets and closed my eyes, letting the anger wash over me. The sheer audacity of it all was suffocating. I am a director of supply chain risk management for a massive international shipping corporation. Every single day, I sit in glass boardrooms and negotiate contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. I am ruthless at my job. I identify weak links, I cut losses, and I do not let people walk over me or my team. Yet, when it came to my own flesh and blood, I was entirely blind. I let them manipulate me, drain my resources, and gaslight me into believing that my worth as a human being was directly tied to the available limit on my credit card. Nurse Greer walked into the room to check my vitals. She was a tough, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, her scrubs crisp, her eyes sharp. She had seen it all in the ICU. She adjusted the Ford drip, her eyes scanning the monitor before landing on my pale, sweaty face. She noticed the phone resting on my chest and the grim, hardened expression I wore. I did not have to say a single word. She knew. She had seen families abandon their sick relatives before. She recognized the hollow look of betrayal. She leaned in close, checking my oxygen mask, and muttered in a low, gravelly voice, "Blood relations do not give anyone a free pass to drain your life away, honey. You owe them nothing." She was right. I had been bleeding out long before I ever stepped foot into this hospital. The infection in my blood was nothing compared to the toxic loyalty I had carried for my family for over a decade. The silence of the hospital room felt heavy, pressing down on my chest. I thought about the glossy image of Tamsin smiling with that perfect, practiced smirk. Tamsin, the golden child. The sister who could do no wrong, even when she was doing absolutely nothing with her life. The sister whose lavish lifestyle I had been subsidizing while she treated me like a boring corporate drone. I thought about my mother, Odelia, who always played the victim, manipulating every conversation so she never had to take accountability for her overspending. And my father, Orson, the puppet master, whose rare nods of approval I had chased my entire life like a starving dog begging for scraps. My lungs burned with every shallow breath. I felt weak, broken, and utterly alone in the world. But beneath that physical weakness, a spark of pure, unadulterated rage ignited. It started small, a tiny ember in the pit of my stomach, but with every second that passed, every beep of the monitor, it grew. It fueled me. It gave me strength when my physical body had none left to offer. They thought they could leave me here to die while they played high rollers with my hard-earned money. They thought I would just take it, like I always did, because I was trapped by my pathetic need for their love. I looked up at the ceiling tiles, my jaw clenched so tight my back teeth ached. They wanted to see if dying would make me interesting? Fine. I would give them a show they would never, ever forget. I reached for my phone again, my fingers no longer shaking from fear, but from the electric surge of pure adrenaline. I looked at the text message one last time. I memorized every cruel word. I locked it away in a dark corner of my mind, saving it for the exact moment I would need it to burn their fake, gilded world to the ground. I was not going to die today. I was going to survive. And when I walked out of this hospital, they were going to learn what it actually means to be cut off. Lying in that sterile hospital bed, staring at the blinding white ceiling, my mind began to construct a museum. A sprawling, vivid museum of pain, humiliation, and relentless financial abuse. Every exhibit in this mental gallery was a crystal-clear memory of how they had used me, a towering monument to my own foolish desperation for their approval. I forced myself to walk through the halls of this museum, examining every agonizing detail so I would never, ever forget why I was about to do what I had to do. The first exhibit was from when I was 18 years old. I had just been accepted into a top-tier university, a dream I had worked tirelessly for throughout high school. I remember sitting at the worn oak kitchen table, clutching the thick envelope containing my acceptance letter, my heart pounding against my ribs with pure, unfiltered excitement. I waited for Orson to pat me on the back. I waited for Odelia to tell me she was proud of her daughter. Instead, Orson didn't even bother to look up from the sports section of his newspaper. He just sighed loudly, took a sip of his black coffee, and said, "We are not paying for that, Vesper. You are on your own. Save your money for Tamsin. She is the one with real potential. You are better off going to community college and getting a secretarial job." Tamsin was 14 at the time, and her supposed real potential consisted of taking endless selfies, bullying other girls at the local mall, and failing basic algebra. I was crushed, but I did not argue. I took out massive, suffocating student loans. I worked 3 different part-time jobs while carrying a full course load. I ate cheap instant noodles for dinner and slept maybe 4 hours a night. I built my career from the dirt up, entirely alone, carrying the weight of their rejection on my shoulders every single step of the way. As I walked further into my mental museum, the exhibits grew more expensive and far more absurd. 5 years ago, Orson lost his job as a regional sales manager. He blamed the economy. He blamed the shifting management. He blamed the younger generation entering the workforce. He blamed everyone and everything but his own declining performance, his stubborn refusal to learn new software, and his incredibly toxic attitude toward his coworkers. To keep up appearances within his social circle, he took a part-time gig managing the front desk at a high-end golf course in the suburbs. It paid next to nothing, but it allowed him to wear polo shirts and rub elbows with the wealthy elite he so desperately wanted to impress. That was when I stepped in. I was making very good money in supply chain management by then. I thought, naively, if I help them out just this once, if I ease their burden, maybe they will finally see my value. Maybe they will finally look at me and be proud of the successful woman I had become. I started paying their monthly mortgage to keep the bank from foreclosing on their house. Then I started covering their premium high-speed internet bill. Then came Odelia's ridiculous country club fees, so she could continue playing the role of a wealthy, carefree socialite at her weekly afternoon tea parties. My money quickly became the vital mortar holding up their crumbling facade of old money elegance. But the grand centerpiece of this museum, the largest and most destructive monument to their parasitism, was my sister, Tamsin. Tamsin had never held a real, tax-paying job in her entire life. She considered 9-to-5 corporate work to be beneath her artistic spirit. Instead, she branded herself as a serial entrepreneur. In reality, this meant she started incredibly foolish vanity projects and threw tantrums until I funded them. The most recent disaster was a luxury lifestyle subscription box business. I clearly remembered the afternoon she cornered me in our parents' living room for the seed money. She tossed a hastily scribbled business plan, which was mostly just a vision board of aesthetic Pinterest photos, onto the glass coffee table. "It is going to be huge, Vesper," she had said, flipping her perfectly styled hair. "Everyone is doing subscription boxes. I just need $25,000 to secure the initial inventory and the custom packaging." I had hesitated. I tried to explain, using my corporate background, that $25,000 was a massive amount of capital to risk on an untested, oversaturated market idea. Orson immediately stepped in, his face turning red, his voice dripping with heavy condescension. "Do not be so selfish, Vesper," he barked. "You make that in a month. Support your sister's dreams for once instead of hoarding your wealth. Family helps family. It is the least you can do." The guilt trip worked. It always did. The deep-seated fear of being alienated from my own family overrode my financial logic. I pulled out my checkbook and wrote a check for $25,000. I handed it to Tamsin, hoping for a simple thank you, or perhaps a hug. She looked at the piece of paper, rolled her eyes in profound annoyance, and complained, "You used a blue pen? Ugh, blue ruins the feng shui of receiving money. Whatever, I will just deposit it today and deal with the bad energy." Not a single shred of gratitude. Just pure, unadulterated entitlement. Her business tanked within 3 short months. She spent the majority of the money on branded packaging, expensive photo shoots of herself holding the boxes, and a lavish launch party for her superficial Instagram friends, leaving almost nothing for the actual products inside the boxes. When the vendors and creditors came calling, threatening legal action, I bailed her out again. I paid off her debts to save the family name from public embarrassment. Over the last 5 years, I had kept a meticulous, hidden spreadsheet of every dime I spent on them. The total number was staggering. $145,000. Let that sink in. $145,000 that I had literally set on fire to keep them warm while they complained about the smoke. I had funded their car leases, their auto insurance, their lavish dinners out, their premium cable packages, and their fake status in the community. And what did I get in return for buying their entire existence? I got a text message telling me my funeral would be cheaper than my medical bills. The memories swirled around me in the hospital room, toxic, heavy, and suffocating. I realized, with a clarity that cut like glass, that they never loved me. They never even liked me. They loved what I could do for them. I was not a daughter. I was a public utility. I was a resource to be mined until I was entirely empty. And the exact moment I became inconvenient, the moment my body failed and I actually needed them to be parents, they discarded me without a second thought. The anger was no longer a spark, it was a roaring furnace. I let it burn away the lingering guilt, the misplaced sense of obligation, and the desperate, weeping child inside me who just wanted a hug. I was done being the family scapegoat. I was done being the Bank of Vesper. They had mistaken my desperate kindness for weakness, my generosity for stupidity. They had grown fat and comfortably feasted on my hard work. I shifted in the stiff hospital bed, the monitors beeping steadily into the quiet room. The fluid dripped slowly into my battered vein. I was physically weak, confined to this room, but mentally, I was preparing for a war they had no idea was coming. They always told their relatives I was lucky. But they never mentioned that my luck was the only thing keeping the roof from collapsing on their heads. Literally and figuratively. The facade of the perfect, wealthy suburban family is a terrifying thing to dismantle, mostly because it requires such delicate precision to maintain in the first place. My parents, Orson and Odelia, were absolute masters of the suburban illusion. To the outside world, specifically the gossipy, status-obsessed enclave of Atlanta where they resided, they were the very epitome of refined success. They threw lavish garden parties with catered appetizers, wore designer labels they couldn't afford, and drove leased luxury cars they constantly complained about maintaining. But behind closed doors, it was all a fragile house of cards, and I was the idiot standing in the center, holding my breath and emptying my wallet so it wouldn't blow over and crush them. I thought about Odelia's social media presence. It was a carefully curated, heavily filtered gallery of faux wealth. Pictures of her sipping artisanal lattes on patios, complaining to her followers about how hard it was to find good, reliable help for her boutique, event planning business. A business that, in reality, had exactly 0 paying clients over the last 3 years. Her real full-time job was maintaining her image among her judgmental peers. She used a high-limit supplementary credit card issued in my name, tied directly to my bank account, and paid by my salary, to buy expensive designer dresses, wear them exactly once to a charity luncheon so she could be photographed, and then leave them rotting in her oversized closet. When I occasionally built up the courage to bring up the exorbitant, eye-watering credit card bills, she would immediately tear up, play the devastated victim, and wail loudly about how I was trying to control her life and ruin her joy. Then Orson would swoop in like a dark cloud, berate me for disrespecting my mother, and the toxic cycle would reset itself for another month. And then there was Orson. Orson's ego was a massive, swirling black hole that no amount of money or praise could ever fill. His position at the golf course was an absolute joke. He was essentially a glorified greeter who handed out scorecards, but he paraded around the clubhouse like he was a majority shareholder. He constantly belittled my career in supply chain management, calling my corporate achievements unimaginative, bland, and lacking true entrepreneurial spirit. He desperately needed to feel superior. He needed to believe that his own failure was just a temporary, unfair setback caused by the universe, and that my success was somehow unearned or lucky. To feed his massive delusion, I had secured a highly exclusive corporate membership at that very same golf club through my company, allowing him full VIP access as my designated guest. I let him pretend to the other members that it was his own hard-earned perk. I let him buy rounds of expensive scotch for his fake friends on my corporate tab, silently covering the invoices when they hit my desk. I fed the monster month after month because I was terrified of what would happen if I stopped. I was terrified of the silence, the cold shoulders, the subtle punishments they inflicted when the money stopped flowing. As I lay in the ICU, the harsh fluorescent lights glaring aggressively above my bed, the scattered pieces of their current Vegas trip began to click together in my feverish mind, forming a picture so ugly it made my stomach turn. Something was fundamentally wrong about the timeline of their vacation. A week ago, before the pneumonia took hold and the sepsis hit, I had called Orson to share some rare, massive good news. I had just been officially promoted to Director of Supply Chain Risk Management. It was a huge leap in my career, and it came with a massive annual bonus. I had naively, stupidly suggested we celebrate as a family. I offered to fly them all out to Vegas for a weekend, all expenses paid by me, just to have a nice family dinner, see a show, and celebrate my hard work. Orson had agreed immediately. He sounded unusually excited, even praising my work ethic for the first time in years. But then I got sick. The illness hit fast and incredibly hard, spiraling into sepsis within 48 hours. I was rushed to the hospital and hospitalized just days before the planned trip. I assumed, naturally, that the trip was canceled. Normal families cancel vacations when their child is fighting for their life on a ventilator. Then came the text. The photo at the Bellagio. The cruel joke about my funeral. The realization hit me with the physical force of a freight train. They hadn't canceled the trip. They had simply removed me from the equation. The trip that was specifically supposed to be a celebration of my promotion, my hard work, had been violently hijacked. They had taken the first-class flights I paid for, the luxury hotel suites I booked, and used them for a joyride without me. But it was even worse than that. I forced myself to sit up slightly, ignoring the searing pain radiating through my chest. I grabbed my phone and opened my secure banking app. I bypassed the main accounts and checked the recent transactions on the supplementary credit card I had given Tamsin for absolute emergencies only. There it was, glowing on the screen in cold, hard numbers. A charge at a high-stakes casino table for $10,000. My heart pounded against my ribs, racing faster than the monitor could track. I dug deeper into the pending transactions. Another charge. $5,000 to a luxury designer boutique on the Vegas Strip. They didn't just go to Vegas without me. They were actively, aggressively draining my accounts while I was hooked up to life support machinery. The celebration trip was just a convenient cover. Tamsin had racked up massive gambling debts playing the high roller, and my parents were using my money to bail her out and fund their lavish vacation. They had quite literally stolen my celebration to fund their degeneracy. The sheer audacity was staggering. They were sitting in a luxury suite, sipping expensive champagne, laughing at my expense, while I was fighting for my life in a sterile, terrifying room. They thought I was too weak, too sick, too medicated to notice. They thought they were invincible because I had always shielded them from the consequences of their actions. If you have ever had a toxic family member use guilt to drain you dry, let me know in the comments right now. The things I did next might give you some ideas on how to handle them. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel to see exactly how I turned the tables and burned their facade to the ground. The illusion was permanently shattered. The carefully curated facade was gone. I finally saw them for exactly what they were, parasites. They didn't just want my money, they wanted my life energy. They wanted to consume everything I had built, every achievement, every dollar, until there was nothing left of me but a hollow shell. I gripped the cold metal railing of the hospital bed, my knuckles turning white. They thought they had won. They thought they had outsmarted the system. I used to think I was their anchor. But Nurse Greer was right. I wasn't an anchor. I was a leech for them to suck blood from. And now it was time for me to sprinkle salt on them. Day 3 in the ICU arrived with a heavy, suffocating grimness. The infection had dug its claws deep into my system. My fever spiked again in the middle of the night, leaving me drenched in cold sweat, hallucinating dark shadows in the corners of the stark white room. The doctors were visibly concerned during their morning rounds. The aggressive antibiotics weren't working as fast as they had hoped, and my blood pressure was dangerously unstable. I felt incredibly heavy, as if I were slowly sinking into a dark, muddy ocean. Every breath I took was a conscious, agonizing effort that required all my focus. It was mid-morning when I decided to make one final, desperate attempt at contact. Not for help. Not for sympathy. I didn't want them to save me anymore. I needed confirmation. I needed to hear their voices one last time, to know without a shadow of a doubt that what I was about to do was entirely justified. I needed to permanently lock away any lingering sliver of daughterly guilt that might try to sabotage my resolve later. I picked up my phone from the tray. My fingers felt thick, clumsy, and numb. I slowly dialed Odelia's cell phone number and put it on speakerphone, resting the device heavily on my chest. It rang 4 times. 5 times. I was just about to hang up, assuming she was ignoring me, when the line clicked open. A massive wall of noise blasted through the tiny speaker. It was the chaotic, overwhelming, unmistakable sound of a casino floor, bells ringing rapidly, slot machines chiming cheerful digital tunes, the low, buzzing roar of 100 conversations, and the clinking of glasses. "Hello." Odelia's voice was strained, loud, and deeply annoyed. "Mom," I rasped. My voice sounded completely alien to my own ears, thin and broken like dry paper rustling in the wind. "It's Vesper." "Vesper. Hang on, I can barely hear you over these obnoxious machines." The sound muffled slightly, like she was covering the phone's microphone with her hand. I heard her yell in the background, away from the phone, "Orson, hold my martini, it's Vesper again." Then she came back, her tone sharp. "What is it? We are right in the middle of a massive hot streak at the slots. You really picked a terrible time to call and bother us." I closed my eyes. The sheer callousness of it felt like a physical blow to my already bruised chest. "Mom, I am in the ICU. It is sepsis. It is really, really bad. The doctors. I might not make it." There was a pause on the line. For a fleeting, pathetic second, the wounded child inside me thought she might actually care. I thought the primal mother instinct might finally kick in, that she would gasp, drop her drink, and demand to know how quickly she could get a flight back to Atlanta. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Vesper," Odelia groaned loudly. It was not a gasp of shock. It was a prolonged groan of profound irritation. "Don't be so incredibly dramatic. You always exaggerate everything when things aren't going your way. It is just a bad flu. You are at a fancy hospital. You have the best doctors. You will be fine." "Mom, my organs are struggling to function. I need my family here." "Here? You want us to drop everything we are doing and fly back right now?" Odelia scoffed, the sound sharp and biting. "Do you have any idea how much money we spent on these non-refundable VIP spa packages? Tamsin is finally relaxing after all her immense business stress. You getting sick at the absolute worst possible time has already ruined the vibe of this trip. We are not throwing away a luxury vacation just because you want to be the center of attention." I lay perfectly still in the bed. The rhythmic beeping of my heart monitor seemed impossibly loud, drowning out the casino noises for a brief second. And frankly, Odelia continued, her voice dripping with venomous irritation, "Your father is still furious about your attitude. You are supposed to be the successful, independent one, yet you can't even manage your own health without causing a massive scene. We need this break, Vesper. Just rest and stop calling. We will call you when we get back on Tuesday." She didn't ask what hospital I was in. She didn't ask to speak to the attending physician. She didn't ask if I was in pain. She just wanted me to hang up and stop ruining her aesthetic Vegas vibe. Nurse Greer had entered the room halfway through the call to check my 4 bags. She stood perfectly still in the corner, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was a terrifying mask of cold, professional fury. She had heard every single word echoing from the speakerphone. As Odelia continued to complain loudly about how terrible the casino buffet was compared to last year, Greer stepped forward with purposeful strides. She reached out with a gloved hand and firmly tapped the red end call button on my screen. The line went dead instantly. The silence in the hospital room was deafening, heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Greer looked down at me. Her sharp eyes softened, swirling with a mixture of deep pity and fierce, unwavering resolve. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She didn't pat my hand and tell me it was going to be okay, because she knew it wasn't. She leaned down, her face inches from mine, and whispered fiercely, "Do not shed a single tear for people who have run out of tears for you. They made their choice, honey. Now you make yours." She adjusted my heavy blankets, gave my shoulder a firm, reassuring squeeze that communicated more support than my parents had offered in a decade, and walked briskly out of the room to fetch my next round of strong antibiotics. I lay there entirely alone. The experience of the final thread snapping is profound. You expect it to be loud, chaotic, filled with screaming, crying, and throwing things. But it wasn't. It was dead silent. It was a cold, absolute certainty settling deep into my bones, freezing the last remnants of my naive hope. I had my confirmation. They didn't love me. They didn't care if I lived or died, as long as the credit cards kept working and the mortgage got paid. I was a ghost to them, a convenient ghost that funded their reality. I took a deep, rattling breath. The physical pain was still there, tearing at my insides, but the immense emotional weight that had been crushing my soul for a decade was entirely gone. I was finally free. The call ended with a long beep. I lay there, listening to my own heartbeat on the monitor. It was slow, but steady. I would live. And when I walked out of this room, their world would burn to ashes. The severing began quietly. Total war does not always start with loud explosions or screaming matches. Sometimes, the most destructive campaigns start with the simple, silent click of a button in a dark room. The fever had broken slightly by late afternoon, leaving me physically weak, drenched in sweat, but fiercely, dangerously lucid. My mind was a steel trap. I propped myself up against the stiff, uncomfortable hospital pillows, ignoring the protests of my aching muscles. I grabbed my iPad from the rolling bedside table. My fingers flew across the glass screen with practiced speed. I was entirely in my element now. Risk management. That was my job. Identifying critical vulnerabilities, mitigating catastrophic losses, and ruthlessly shutting down compromised systems. My family was a compromised system, a massive liability, and it was time to cut the dead weight. First target, the lifeblood of their fake, opulent wealth. I logged into my main, highly secure banking portal. I navigated past my checking and savings to the supplementary credit card management page. These were the exact cards they were currently swiping in Vegas to buy luxury bags, cover expensive dinners, and fund their high-roller fantasies. I didn't just lower the credit limits to send a warning. I didn't temporarily pause them. I clicked directly on the red button labeled Report Lost or Stolen. The automated prompt asked for a specific reason for the cancellation. My fingers tapped the digital keyboard without hesitation. I typed, compromised by unauthorized users. Suspected fraud. Click. Submit. Processing. Confirmed. Just like that, the shiny plastic cards in their expensive leather wallets turned into utterly useless pieces of garbage. They would find out soon enough when the next bartender or boutique clerk handed the card back with a sympathetic, humiliating grimace. Second target, the intricate infrastructure of their daily comfort. I opened my automated bill pay settings. For years, I had set up an elaborate web of recurring transfers, so they never had to worry about the mundane, stressful realities of adult life. It was a long, pathetic list of my own enabling behavior. I went down the line like a cold, calculating executioner. Tamsin's premium, full coverage auto insurance for her ridiculous imported SUV? Cancelled. Effective immediately. Let her drive uninsured and see how long it takes for her to get pulled over. The high-speed, top-tier fiber optic internet package at my parents' house? Terminated. No more streaming movies. No more endless online shopping sprees for Odelia. No more pretending to be an influencer for Tamsin. The massive monthly bank transfer to cover their mortgage shortfall? Deleted entirely. The bank would be expecting a payment on the first of the month, and they would find nothing but an empty account. The premium cell phone family plan? I accessed the carrier portal and systematically removed their 3 lines, leaving only my own number active. Their expensive smartphones would become heavy, expensive paperweights by midnight tonight. Every single click, every confirmation screen, felt like cutting a heavy, rust-covered chain that had been dragging me underwater for over a decade. The hospital room was completely silent except for the steady hum of the medical machines and the sharp tapping of my fingers on the glass screen. I was systematically dismantling an empire of handouts, brick by brick, wire by wire. Then, I remembered the absolute crown jewel of Orson's fragile, inflated ego, the corporate golf membership. He flaunted that elite membership like it was undeniable proof of his superiority over his neighbors. He belittled the waitstaff, ordered top-shelf imported whiskey, and signed the exorbitant bills with a flourish, knowing full well the invoices went straight to my corporate expense account for processing. It was the ultimate symbol of his fake prestige, his primary weapon for commanding respect he hadn't earned. I opened my secure work email app. My company takes security and expense fraud extremely seriously. Misuse of corporate funds is grounds for immediate termination. I drafted an urgent email to the country club's general manager and intentionally CC'd my corporate finance department to ensure there was a permanent paper trail. Subject: urgent. Immediate revocation of corporate membership privileges. To management, please be advised that effective immediately, all guest privileges extended to Orson under my corporate account are permanently and irrevocably revoked. Any charges incurred after the timestamp of this email are entirely unauthorized and will absolutely not be paid by my corporation. Furthermore, due to inappropriate behavior, please flag his name and license plate at the front security gate. He is no longer permitted on the premises under any circumstances. I read it over once, savoring the harsh, uncompromising language, and hit send. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and pictured the inevitable fallout. I imagined him pulling up to the gated entrance in his leased luxury car on Tuesday morning, expecting the security guard to wave him through with a polite, deferential smile. I imagined the confusion on his face, followed by the rising indignation, and finally, the crushing, inescapable humiliation when he was firmly told to turn his car around in front of a line of real members because he was no longer welcome. The thought of his massive ego shattering into a million pieces in front of his precious golf buddies brought a cold, hard, terrifyingly genuine smile to my face. It was surgical. It was precise. It was devastating. I was stripping away every single layer of financial insulation I had foolishly built around them, exposing them to the harsh, freezing reality of their own incompetence and laziness. They had built their entire identities, their entire comfortable lives, on my dime, and I was finally calling in the massive debt. I leaned back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted by the immense mental effort. My chest ached fiercely, and I was struggling to keep my eyes open as the medication kicked in. But the heavy, suffocating anxiety that had plagued my every waking moment for years was entirely gone. I had finally taken back control of my own life. I checked the digital clock on the wall. It was early evening in Atlanta, which meant it was late afternoon in Vegas. Prime time for shopping, drinking, and swiping cards. The landmines had been carefully planted and armed. It was only a matter of time before they started stepping on them. I pressed the terminate all button. The room remained quiet. There were no explosions. But 2,000 miles away in Nevada, a financial bomb has just officially counted down to zero. The financial severing I had just executed was only the first phase of the war. Cutting off their cash flow was satisfying, but the next phase required a professional touch. I needed to ensure that if this severe infection managed to pull me under, if my body ultimately failed to fight off the sepsis, they wouldn't get a single, solitary dime from my corpse. I was absolutely not going to let them profit from my death, allowing them to use my life insurance to fund more Vegas trips and Hermes bags. I reached for my phone, my hand much steadier now, and dialed Cressida. Cressida was my best friend from college and a ruthlessly efficient, fiercely intelligent financial and estate lawyer. She was the kind of woman who wore sharp, tailored suits, drank her coffee black, and could make grown men cry in depositions without ever raising her voice. More importantly, she knew my family's toxic dynamic better than anyone else in the world and had been begging me, practically pleading with me, for years to cut them off and protect my assets. She picked up on the second ring, the background noise indicating she was still at her firm. Vesper? Please tell me you are calling from a beach sipping a margarita and not the office. I am in the ICU, Cress, I said, my voice hoarse but steady. The playful, joking tone vanished instantly, replaced by razor-sharp focus. What? Which hospital? I am leaving the office right now. I'm on my way. No, wait, stop, I commanded gently but firmly. I need you to work right now, not visit. It is sepsis. I am medically stable for the moment, but I need aggressive legal action immediately, before things go south. Cressida's lawyer mode activated flawlessly. I could hear the rustle of paper and the click of a pen. Tell me exactly what you need. I'm ready. I need to immediately revoke my power of attorney. Right now, Orson and Odelia have full medical and financial proxy over me. If I go into a coma tonight, they control my healthcare, my house, and my bank accounts. Strip it from them. Make yourself my sole proxy. I trust you. I heard furious, rapid typing on her end of the line. Done. I am drafting the emergency revocation as we speak. What else is on the chopping block? My corporate life insurance policy. It pays out $2 million upon my death. They are currently listed as the primary beneficiaries, along with Tamsin. I want them removed. All of them. Erase their names. Change the sole beneficiary to that local animal rescue charity I volunteer for on weekends. Every single penny goes to the dogs. Not a cent to them. Oh, thank God, Cressida breathed, a fierce edge of satisfaction in her voice. I have been waiting for this glorious day for 5 years, Vesper. Consider it done. Is there anything else? Because if you want me to draft a lawsuit for emotional distress and financial abuse, I will gladly do it pro bono just to watch Orson squirm on the stand. I managed a weak, genuine chuckle, which sent a sharp stab of pain radiating through my ribs, reminding me of my precarious physical state. Hold off on the lawsuits for a minute, Cress. Let's just lock down the perimeter first. While I had her on the phone, a bright notification popped up on my iPad screen. It was an urgent alert from the fraud department of my primary bank regarding the supplementary credit card I had reported stolen just an hour ago. The automated system displayed the details of the final decline transaction before the total freeze took effect. I stared at the numbers, my blood running cold with disgust, and read it aloud to Cressida. Cress, you won't even believe this. Try me. Nothing those vultures do surprises me anymore. The card was just violently declined at a high-end vintage boutique on the Vegas Strip. Attempted charge, $8,000 for a vintage Hermes handbag. The buyer name entered at checkout, Tamsin. Cressida let out a low, disbelieving whistle into the receiver. $8,000 on a purse while her sister is literally rotting in an ICU bed? These people aren't just your standard-issue parasites, Vesper, they are full-blown, clinical sociopaths. Good riddance. She was right. The sheer, unadulterated callousness of it was staggering to comprehend. While I was lying here, hooked up to 4 bags, fighting for every single breath of oxygen, Tamsin was furious that her attempt to buy a luxury handbag with my hard-earned money had failed. She wasn't worried about my health. She was worried about her aesthetic accessories. She didn't care if I lived or died. She only cared that the ATM was suddenly out of order. Process the paperwork, Cressida. Overnight it to the hospital for my signature first thing in the morning. Do not let them touch a single asset I own. Build a fortress. I am on it. I will have a bonded courier standing at your bedside by 8 a.m. You just focus on breathing and staying alive, Vesper. I will build the impenetrable fortress. I hung up the phone and placed it gently on the table. The perimeter was officially secured. They had zero access to my cash, my credit, my investment accounts, my emergency funds, or my lucrative death benefits. They were entirely, utterly, and permanently cut off from the host. I closed my eyes and let my heavy head sink deep into the hospital pillow. The physical exhaustion was overwhelming, threatening to pull me under into sleep, but it was a good, clean kind of exhaustion. The kind you feel after hauling years of toxic waste out of your basement and finally breathing fresh air. If you have watched this far and you are rooting for me, drop a comment saying, I'm win. That is the secret code for everyone who stuck around for the legal takedown. I will be hearting and replying to every single comment with that keyword. Thank you for the support. It means everything. The sick, twisted game was officially over. I had packed up the board, taken all the pieces, and locked the door behind me. They thought I was fighting death. Little did they know, I had just become death itself to their pretentious, bourgeois lifestyle. By 8 o'clock that evening, the heavy, suffocating silence of my hospital room was finally shattered. My fever had dipped to a manageable level, leaving me exhausted but incredibly alert. I was lying in the dark, watching the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, when my phone on the bedside table began to vibrate. It did not just ring once or twice. It vibrated with a frantic, relentless urgency, practically dancing across the plastic tray. I did not reach for it immediately. I let it ring. I watched the screen light up in the dim room, casting a pale glow across my bruised hands. 15 missed calls in the span of 20 minutes. The first wave of calls came from Orson. When I did not answer, the notification shifted to voicemails. I waited until the buzzing finally stopped, took a slow, painful breath, and tapped the voicemail icon. I pressed the phone to my ear. "Vesper, pick up the phone right now," Orson's voice hissed through the speaker. He was trying to whisper, but the sheer, unadulterated panic and rage vibrating in his chest made it impossible. In the background, I could hear the faint, elegant clinking of silverware on fine china and the soft murmur of a sophisticated dining room. They were at a Michelin star restaurant. "I am standing at the maitre d's desk," Orson continued, his voice trembling with humiliated fury. "They just declined the credit card. They ran it 3 times, Vesper." The manager came over. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I am here with important potential business partners, and my card is bouncing like a bad check. Call the bank and fix this glitch immediately. Do not make me tell you twice. Fix it." I listened to the message a second time, savoring every single syllable of his panic. He still thought it was a glitch. He still believed, in his profound arrogance, that the universe revolved around his comfort. The next voicemail was from Tamsin. Hers was not a whisper. It was a full-blown, hysterical screech. "Vesper, what the hell is going on? I am at the front desk of the hotel, and security is literally standing right behind me. They said the card on file for the penthouse suite was reported stolen." "Stolen, Vesper. They are threatening to lock us out of the room and keep our luggage until we provide a new form of payment. Dad's card isn't working either. Answer your phone. Stop ignoring us." I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. I pictured my father, a man who built his entire fragile identity on pretending to be richer than everyone else, standing red-faced in front of a snobby restaurant manager, unable to pay for his imported steak. I pictured Tamsin, who believed she was a glamorous social media entrepreneur, throwing a pathetic tantrum in a hotel lobby while security guards treated her like a common scammer. The sheer, delicious irony of it all washed over me like a healing balm. They were stranded, 2,000 miles away from home, drowning in a sea of luxury they could not afford, with empty wallets and canceled cards. I unlocked my phone and opened the family group chat. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. I wanted to write a massive paragraph. I wanted to scream at them through the screen. I wanted to detail every ounce of pain, every tear I had shed, every dollar they had drained from my life. But I realized that explaining myself would only give them power. It would show them that I still cared about their opinions. True power, I had learned in the boardroom, lies in brevity. I typed a single, cold response. "The cards are dead. Just like your daughter. Good luck settling the bill. Enjoy the storm." I hit send. I watched the tiny indicator show that the message had been delivered. I watched it change to read. I gave them exactly 10 seconds to stare at the screen, to let the horrifying reality of their situation sink deep into their bones. Then I went to my phone settings. I blocked Orson. I blocked Odelia. I blocked Tamsin. I placed the phone back on the tray and leaned back against the pillows. The storm had officially made landfall in Las Vegas, and I was safely inside my fortress. They thought this was just a banking error. They had no idea that the financial blackout they were experiencing was permanent. I wondered how they would pay for their flights home. I wondered what items they would have to pawn just to get out of the hotel. For the first time in 31 years, their problems were no longer my problems. How would you react if you were in my shoes? Would you have warned them or let them burn? The fallout was just beginning. The next morning, the sun broke through the hospital blinds, casting warm lines across my bed. My breathing was slightly easier, the antibiotics finally gaining ground against the sepsis. But while my physical body was resting, my family was declaring all-out digital warfare. When toxic people can no longer control you, they will immediately try to control how other people see you. Since they could no longer reach me directly, they unleashed the flying monkeys. A flying monkey is a person manipulated by the toxic abuser to do their dirty work, to guilt-trip the victim, and to spread their false narrative. In my family, the ultimate flying monkey was my Aunt Zella, Orson's older sister. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I hadn't blocked yet. It was Zella. "Vesper, I am disgusted with you," the message read. "Your parents called me crying from Vegas. They are stranded. How could you cut off their money when you know they rely on you? Your father is under so much stress, and you're acting like a spoiled, vindictive child. Turn their cards back on right now. Family is family. You need to apologize and fix this before you ruin your reputation forever." I scoffed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. Zella was a professional gossip who lived for drama. She knew nothing about my finances, nothing about the $145,000 I had bled for them, and certainly nothing about the cruel text message Orson had sent me while I was dying. I didn't reply to Zella. I simply took a screenshot of her message, saved it to a secure folder, and blocked her number too. But Tamsin took it a step further. Tamsin always took it a step further. Later that afternoon, my college friend Mia sent me a link to a TikTok video. "You need to see this," Mia's text read. "Your sister is losing her mind online." I clicked the link. The video opened to Tamsin's face. She had used a subtle beauty filter, but she was doing her absolute best to squeeze out fake, crocodile tears. Her voice shook with practiced, theatrical devastation. "Hey guys," Tamsin whimpered to the camera, wiping a dry eye. "I am just making this video because I am so heartbroken. My older sister, who has always been jealous of my entrepreneurial journey, just financially cut off my entire family out of nowhere. We are literally stranded on a family trip. She canceled our hotel cards, she canceled our food budget, and she is trying to force me to shut down my business by starving us out. It is so toxic. I just want to say, protect your peace, guys. Money turns people into monsters." I watched the video twice. The hypocrisy was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But Tamsin, in her desperate bid for internet sympathy, had made one fatal, hilarious mistake. She was not a smart girl. She had filmed the crying video inside the Vegas penthouse suite. Behind her tear-streaked face, clear as day, was a sprawling view of the Las Vegas Strip through floor-to-ceiling windows. Resting on the marble countertop right over her left shoulder was a massive room service tray filled with empty champagne flutes and half-eaten lobster tails. And draped over the back of a plush velvet chair was the unmistakable orange shopping bag from the vintage Hermes boutique. She was crying about being starved and stranded while surrounded by the very luxury she had stolen from me. She was playing the victim from a 5-star hotel room. I didn't leave an angry comment. I didn't make a reaction video to defend myself. Emotional reactions were exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to look unhinged and crazy. Instead, I operated with corporate precision. I downloaded the video. I took high-resolution screenshots highlighting the lobster tails, the champagne, and the designer shopping bag. I filed everything into the digital folder labeled evidence. They thought public shaming would force me into submission. They thought the fear of family gossip would make me crawl back, reactivate the accounts, and beg for forgiveness. They did not understand that I no longer cared about my reputation among people who only valued my wallet. My phone continued to ping with messages from distant cousins and family friends who had seen Tamsin's video. Some were angry, some were confused, some were demanding answers. I ignored all of them. Let them believe whatever twisted narrative Tamsin was spinning. The truth is a patient hunter. It doesn't need to scream on social media. It just waits for the perfect moment to strike. What is the craziest lie a toxic family member has ever spread about you? Drop it in the comments below, because I guarantee we share some battle scars. The smear campaign was in full effect, but it was nothing compared to the legal bomb I was about to drop on their front porch. By the 5th day, the doctors finally agreed to discharge me. I had lost weight, my skin was pale, and my legs trembled when I stood up, but my blood work was clear. The sepsis was gone. I walked out of the hospital leaning heavily on a cane, breathing in the thick, humid Atlanta air. It felt like stepping onto a brand new planet. I took a rideshare back to my quiet, immaculate apartment. No screaming relatives, no demanding text messages, no chaos. Just peace. But the peace was a temporary staging ground for the final phase of my plan. An hour after I got home, my lawyer, Cressida, arrived. She walked in carrying 2 thick manila folders, 2 coffees, and a smile that looked sharp enough to cut glass. She set the folders on my kitchen island and handed me a pen. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Vesper," she said, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "I have the finalized documents right here. The power of attorney is officially revoked. The life insurance beneficiaries have been entirely wiped clean. But we have a much bigger play to make today." As I signed the documents, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Uncle Theron. Theron was Odelia's younger brother, a gruff, hard-working construction contractor. He was the only person in the family who worked with his hands, which meant Odelia constantly looked down on him. But Theron had always been kind to me. I answered the call. "Vesper, thank God you are home," Theron said, his voice a low rumble. "I just wanted to check on you. The rest of the family is going crazy, but I am not buying a single word of it." "Thanks, Uncle Theron," I said, leaning against the counter. "What are they saying?" "Orson called a massive family meeting on Zoom last night from a motel room," Theron chuckled darkly. "He claimed you went insane from the fever and stole all his life savings." But I called him out. I asked him why his life savings were sitting in an account with your name on it. He stammered for 5 minutes and logged off. "I just want you to know I see through their garbage. Whatever you are doing to them, they deserve it." Hearing Theron validate my reality was a strange, powerful comfort. I thanked him and hung up. I turned back to Cressida. "All right. What is the big play?" Cressida opened the second folder and slid a property deed across the marble island. "Do you remember 5 years ago, when Orson's credit was so destroyed he couldn't refinance the house to pull out cash?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. I co-signed the new loan to save them from bankruptcy." Cressida tapped the paper with a perfectly manicured nail. "You didn't just co-sign, Vesper. Because his credit was a toxic wasteland, the bank required you to be the primary borrower. And more importantly, you are listed as the primary, majority owner on the property deed. It is your house. They just live in it." I stared at the piece of paper, my heart skipping a beat. For 5 years, they had treated that sprawling suburban house like their own personal kingdom. They had hosted parties, redecorated the kitchen, and strutted around the neighborhood, entirely forgetting that the ground they walked on legally belonged to the daughter they treated like garbage. "I contacted a real estate investment group yesterday," Cressida continued, her voice practically purring with satisfaction. "They specialize in rapid house flipping. They buy properties for cash, as is, and close in 3 days. Because you are the primary owner, you have the legal right to sell the property out from under them." The room seemed to spin slightly. I wasn't just cutting off their internet or their credit cards. I had the power to literally pull the roof off their heads. "If I sign this," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, "what happens to them?" "The investment group takes immediate possession," Cressida explained clinically. "They will serve your parents with a standard 30-day notice to vacate the premises. If they do not leave in 30 days, the sheriff will arrive, physically remove their belongings to the curb, and change the locks." I thought about the text message. "A funeral is cheaper than your ICU bill." I thought about Tamsin's fake tears in the Vegas penthouse. I thought about the $145,000 I would never get back. They wanted to strip me down to nothing. It was time to return the favor. I picked up the heavy black pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name on the dotted line, pressing so hard the ink bled through the thick paper. "Sell it," I said, handing the folder back to Cressida. "Sell it today. And make sure the eviction notice is delivered by a uniformed process server." Cressida grinned, sliding the folder into her leather briefcase. "Consider them homeless, Vesper. The counterstrike is officially launched." I poured myself a glass of water and looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. They thought they were untouchable in their suburban castle. They had exactly 30 days to pack up their lies and get out of my house. The impact of the eviction notice was not a quiet event. It was a massive, catastrophic explosion that leveled their entire social standing in the neighborhood. I did not witness it firsthand, but Uncle Theron, bless his heart, gave me a blow-by-blow account of the fallout later that week. According to Theron, the uniformed process server arrived at the house on a bright Tuesday morning, right when Odelia was hosting one of her pretentious patio brunches with 3 other neighborhood wives. The server marched right up the driveway, bypassed the decorative fountain, and handed Odelia a thick manila envelope right in front of her friends. Odelia, assuming it was a delivery for her fake event planning business, opened it with a bright smile. When her eyes scanned the bold letters reading "Notice to Vacate, Transfer of Ownership," the color drained from her face. She dropped her mimosa glass, shattering it on the patio stones, and engaged in a dramatic, theatrical feint right onto the manicured lawn. Her friends panicked. Orson rushed out of the house, grabbed the paper, and started screaming at the process server, threatening to call the police. The server simply tipped his hat, reminded Orson he had 30 days to vacate, and drove away. The illusion of their old money wealth died on that patio. By noon, the entire subdivision knew they were being evicted. The internal collapse of their toxic dynamic happened even faster. When the money disappeared, they turned on each other like starving wolves. Tamsin panicked because the entire garage was filled with unsold, useless inventory for her subscription box business. She demanded Orson pay for a climate-controlled storage unit. When Orson admitted his bank accounts were overdrawn and his credit cards were canceled, Tamsin threw a massive tantrum, screaming that they had ruined her life and her entrepreneurial future. But the most spectacular betrayal came from Aunt Zella. Zella, the chief flying monkey who had harassed me via text, drove over to the house to comfort Orson. While she was there, the truth about the Vegas trip finally spilled out. Zella discovered that just days before I went into the ICU, Orson had tearfully begged Zella for a $10,000 loan, claiming it was to help cover my emergency medical bills because my insurance had denied the claim. He had stolen $10,000 from his own sister, using my near-death experience as a sob story, and took that money straight to the Bellagio casino. Theron told me Zella went atomic. She screamed so loud the neighbors called the police for a noise complaint. She demanded her money back, and when Orson admitted he had lost it all at the blackjack tables, she slapped him across the face, stormed out, and immediately blasted the entire story on her Facebook page. The family completely fractured. The smear campaign against me dissolved instantly as they all began tearing each other apart for the remaining scraps. I watched this chaos unfold from the quiet sanctuary of my apartment. I felt no pity. I felt no remorse. I felt a deep, profound sense of justice. But Orson's ego was a dangerous, wounded animal. Cornered, humiliated, and facing homelessness, he decided to play one final, desperate card. A week before the 30-day eviction notice was up, I received a certified letter in the mail. It was a summons to appear in civil court. Orson and Odelia had somehow found a sleazy, desperate lawyer willing to take their case on contingency. They were formally suing me for elder financial abuse, breach of verbal contract, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They were also petitioning the court for an emergency restraining order against me, claiming I was mentally unstable and a danger to their safety. I read the summons while sipping my morning coffee. They wanted to drag me into a courtroom. They wanted to stand in front of a judge and paint me as a monster. They thought the threat of a public legal battle, the fear of having my name dragged through the mud on public record, would finally break my resolve. They expected me to settle out of court, to give them the house back, to turn the money spigots back on just to make the lawsuit go away. I picked up my phone and called Cressida. "Did you get it?" I asked when she answered. "I got my copy," Cressida laughed, a sharp, dangerous sound. "Elder financial abuse. That is incredibly bold for a man who used your corporate account to buy premium scotch. Are you worried?" Not even a little bit, I replied, looking at the massive stack of evidence folders sitting on my desk. Tell me we have a court date. Next Thursday, Cressida said. Where's something sharp? We are going to bury them. When cornered, toxic people will always project their own sins onto you. They wanted a war in a courtroom, but they were bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. The courthouse was cold, smelling of floor wax and old paper. I wore a tailored, dark navy power suit, the kind I usually reserved for hostile corporate takeovers. My posture was straight, my face entirely impassive. Cressida walked beside me, pulling a heavy rolling briefcase that contained 500 meticulously indexed pages of evidence. When we entered the courtroom, I saw them. Orson, Odelia, and Tamsin sat at the plaintiff's table. They looked terrible. The stress of the impending eviction and the lack of my financial cushion had aged them rapidly. Orson's suit looked slightly wrinkled, lacking its usual arrogant crispness. Odelia had foregone her designer makeup, opting for a pale, fragile look to play up the abused elder angle. Tamsin just looked fiercely bored, staring at her phone. Their lawyer was a sweaty man in a cheap gray suit who looked entirely out of his depth. When the judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, called the case, Orson's lawyer stood up. He launched into a dramatic, sweeping narrative about how I was a wealthy, vindictive daughter who had maliciously lured my vulnerable parents into a false sense of financial security, only to pull the rug out from under them while they were traveling. He claimed my actions were a calculated form of elder abuse designed to leave them destitute and homeless. Odelia actually managed to squeeze out a few real tears, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The judge listened quietly, taking notes. Then, she turned her sharp gaze to our table. Does the defense have a response? Cressida stood up slowly. She did not yell. She did not use dramatic hand gestures. She spoke with lethal, clinical precision. Your Honor, the plaintiffs are not victims of financial abuse. They are the perpetrators of it. Cressida opened the rolling briefcase. She started handing massive binders to the bailiff to present to the judge. Exhibit A, Cressida stated clearly, her voice echoing in the quiet room. A forensic accounting of the $145,000 my client has voluntarily paid to sustain the plaintiff's lifestyle over the past 5 years. Included are mortgage payments, luxury car leases, and business loans to the sister, none of which were ever repaid. The judge flipped through the binder, her eyebrows rising slightly at the sheer volume of the numbers. Exhibit B, Cressida continued relentlessly. Credit card statements proving that while my client was hospitalized in the intensive care unit with life-threatening sepsis, the plaintiffs used my client's funds to gamble tens of thousands of dollars and purchase luxury designer goods in Las Vegas. Orson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The sweaty lawyer furiously whispered something to him. And finally, Exhibit C, regarding the claim of emotional distress. Cressida pulled out a large, color-printed presentation board. She placed it on an easel facing the judge. It was a blown-up, high-resolution screenshot of the text message. This is a message sent by the plaintiff, Orson, to my client while she was fighting for her life on a hospital ventilator. Cressida read the words aloud, her tone dripping with disgust. A funeral is cheaper than your ICU bill. Enjoy the drama, Vesper. Your Honor, these people did not just abandon my client when she almost died. They mocked her. And when she finally stopped paying for their luxury vacations, they filed a frivolous lawsuit to harass her. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The judge stared at the enlarged text message for a long, heavy moment. She looked at Orson, her expression shifting from neutral professional to deep, profound disgust. Mr. Orson, the judge said, her voice like cracking ice. Is this your phone number? Orson swallowed hard, his arrogant facade crumbling entirely. It was a joke, Your Honor. Taken out of context. A joke, the judge repeated flatly. She slammed the file shut. I have heard enough. The plaintiff's claims are entirely baseless, frivolous, and bordering on malicious prosecution. Case dismissed with prejudice. You will also be responsible for the defendant's legal fees. Before Orson could even react, Cressida spoke up again. Your Honor, based on the harassment, the social media smear campaign, and this retaliatory lawsuit, My client has filed a countermotion for a permanent restraining order against all 3 plaintiffs. The judge didn't even blink. Granted. No contact, digital or physical. You must remain a minimum of 500 feet away from the defendant, her residence, and her place of employment at all times. Violation will result in immediate arrest. We are adjourned. The gavel banged. It was the loudest, most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked calmly toward the heavy wooden doors. As I entered the hallway, Orson burst through the doors behind me, his face purple with rage. He had lost his house, his money, and his pride in one swift motion. "Vesper," he barked, stepping toward me with his fists clenched. "You think you can just erase us? After everything we did to raise you?" I stopped. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I slowly turned to face him. I looked him up and down, taking in the pathetic, desperate reality of the man who used to terrify me. "Look down," I said, my voice eerily calm. Orson paused, confused. "You are currently standing about 3 feet away from me," I told him, tapping the face of my watch. "The judge's order mandates 500 feet. There are 3 armed bailiffs standing right by the metal detectors at the end of this hall. If you take one more step toward me, I will have you arrested and put in a holding cell before lunch." The color drained from his purple face, leaving him looking sickly and gray. The realization finally hit him. I held all the cards. I held all the power. I was no longer his victim. He took a slow, trembling step backward. "Good choice," I whispered. "Have a nice life, Orson." I turned on my heel and walked out of the courthouse, stepping into the bright, blinding sunlight of my brand new life. 2 years later. Time is a remarkable filter. It washes away the noise and leaves only the undeniable truth of who people really are when the money runs out. My life had accelerated in ways I never thought possible once the massive anchor of my family was finally cut loose. Without the constant, draining stress of funding their chaos, I threw myself into my career with renewed focus. I was promoted to Vice President of Global Operations. The salary was astronomical, but more importantly, the work was deeply fulfilling. I moved out of my apartment and bought a stunning penthouse overlooking the city's skyline. I adopted a massive, goofy golden retriever named Cooper, who greeted me every evening like I was the most important person on earth. I started dating again, meeting a wonderful man who understood my boundaries and respected my peace. I was thriving. The silence from my family was golden. The permanent restraining order held firm, creating an impenetrable legal wall around my life. But in a city like Atlanta, word eventually travels, and Uncle Theron occasionally dropped by my office for lunch to give me the updates I never asked for, but secretly relished hearing. The house flippers had ruthlessly enforced the eviction. My parents and Tamsin were thrown out onto the street precisely 30 days after the notice was served. Without my corporate income to co-sign their applications, their destroyed credit scores made it impossible to rent a decent apartment. The mighty had fallen, and they had hit the concrete hard. Tamsin's entrepreneurial journey ended exactly where it belonged. She was currently working the night shift as a cashier at a brightly lit gas station off the interstate, forced to wear a polyester uniform and deal with angry commuters. Odelia, who used to spend her days sipping mimosas and complaining about the help, was now working as a part-time janitor for a local high school, sweeping the very floors she used to look down on. And Orson, the proud, arrogant puppet master. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. I was driving home from the office in my new Porsche SUV, stopping at a massive, discount supermarket on the edge of town to grab some specialty dog food for Cooper. The rain was coming down in thick, freezing sheets, turning the parking lot into a gray, miserable ocean. As I sat in the heated leather seat of my car, waiting for a pedestrian to cross, I saw him. He was wearing a cheap, oversized yellow reflective vest over a faded sweater. He was soaked to the bone, his gray hair plastered to his forehead. He was hunched over, struggling to push a massive, rattling line of wet shopping carts through the freezing rain toward the store entrance. He looked small. He looked fragile. He looked incredibly, profoundly old. Life had chipped away at his arrogant facade piece by piece, leaving nothing but a tired, broken man pushing metal carts for minimum wage. As he struggled with a jammed wheel on the cart, he paused to catch his breath and looked up. His eyes locked directly onto mine through the rain-streaked windshield of my Porsche. For a long, suspended moment, time stopped. I saw the flash of recognition in his eyes. I saw the shock of seeing the daughter he threw away sitting in a luxury vehicle, glowing with health and success. And then I saw the shame. It was a deep, crushing shame that seemed to make him physically shrink even smaller under the pouring rain. He opened his mouth, perhaps to say something, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to beg. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't honk the horn. I didn't smile, and I didn't glare. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, no vindication. Just a cold, vast emptiness where my father used to be. I simply reached out, pressed the button to close the sunroof shade, shifted the car into drive, and smoothly pulled out of the parking lot, leaving him standing there in the freezing rain with his line of broken carts. The strange thing about revenge is that the best kind isn't about actively hurting the people who hurt you. It is about removing their access to you and living so incredibly well that your absence becomes their greatest punishment. They assumed losing me would be temporary. They assumed that my need for their validation would eventually override my self-respect, and I would crawl back with my checkbook open, begging for forgiveness. Instead, they lost the best thing that had ever happened to them. They lost the ultimate safety net. And in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift possible: the freedom to build a life I actually wanted to live. I parked my car in the private garage of my penthouse building. I rode the private elevator up to my floor. When the doors opened, Cooper was waiting for me, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. The smell of dinner cooking drifted from the kitchen, where my partner was laughing at something on the television. My home was warm, it was safe, and it was entirely mine. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the glittering lights of the city below. I thought about the terrified, feverish woman lying in the ICU 2 years ago, reading a text message that shattered her world. I wished I could reach back through time and tell her that the pain of the severing was worth it. I turned away from the window and walked into the light of my living room. That is a trade I will make every single day for the rest of my life. Before we wrap up, I have a question for you all. There are some distant relatives who still whisper that I went too far. They say that Orson is an old man pushing carts in the rain, and that I should find it in my heart to forgive him and send them a monthly allowance so they don't have to suffer in their old age. What do you guys think? Am I wrong for keeping the door permanently locked and letting them face the harsh consequences of their actions, or should I be the bigger person and bail them out one last time? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate financial karma, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on our daily stories. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, never let anyone convince you that protecting your peace makes you the bad guy. See you in the next video.